Good evening and welcome to Eastern Ontario chapter of the Canadian Condominium Institute, the relationship between the board, managers, and owners. My name is Nadia Freeman and we have Val Kamenko. We are both on the Education Committee for the Eastern chapter of the Canadian Condominium Institute. Both Val and I are condominium managers and speakers for this session. We also have Pat O'Brien, who is president of OCSS number 693. Following a career in public relations and community with Ontario Power Generation, Pat retired in Ottawa, purchasing a new built condo in 2005. He was elected to the first board of directors and has served on the board for 13 years. Pat has led the condominium through successful legal settlements with the developer, as well as building management and owner issues. Pat is a strong supporter of CCI. Pat believes there should be strong, active, and respectful relation between property management and the board. Pat is also an active volunteer within his community, serving on the Hintonburg Community Association Zoning Committee and working with several social service organizations. And we also have SF Carpel. SF is the treasurer of OSSC number 809. SF has been serving on the Hudson Park Board as a director since 2017 and as treasurer since 2019. When not doing board-related work, he works as a software development manager at Shopify. Before we get started, I want to go over a couple of Zoom procedures. We are recording this webinar to be posted on our CCI EO website. Our audience is muted and your videos are off for the presentation. We ask that you please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to ask questions. Please do not use the chat function. We are recording this session and it will be available tomorrow afternoon, posted in the virtual classroom, which you all should have received the login. All questions will be reviewed and replied to at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to type your question to us during the presentation. The information you are being provided today is general information, and primary purpose of this webinar is to educate and inform. This webinar does not constitute professional legal advice or services. Please consult with your corporation's legal counsel for an opinion about your specific situation. This webinar is not intended to provide you with the opinion that would protect you under Section 37 of the Act. Also, please be advised that the references to the Condominium Act or other legislation is reference to Ontario legislation. Before we move into the presentation, we would like to extend our sincere thanks and appreciation to our presenters and our sponsors this evening. Once again, our presenters are Pat O'Brien and SF Carpel. And our sponsors are Elia Associates, the regional group, and 3D Security. Val, I turn this portion of the meeting over to you to put up the slides.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nadia, and welcome everyone, and welcome myself, and welcome Pat. Thank you so much for joining. All right, let's see.
Great to be here.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, in today's session, we're going to look at the three segments. In the first segment, we're going to define the relationship. We're going to look at the definitions under the Condominium Act and the governing documents. In the second segment, we're actually going to explore the relationship. We're going to look at the roles, responsibilities of the board, the owner, and the manager. And lastly, we're going to manage that relationship. We're going to show you the managing and maintaining the relationship. We're going to try managing the conflict, and our panelists are going to provide some tips to improve and foster great relationships between the board, manager, and the owner. The first segment is define the relationship. So now I'm going to talk about a little bit about some of the definitions that are in the Act, and we're going to go through them. Before we begin, The relationship is the way in which two or more people are connected or feel and behave towards each other. In today's session, we're going to look at how the parties are connected and how they behave towards each other. Under the Condominium Act, the corporation is the corporation created under the Condominium Act. The owner is a person who is shown as the owner of a freehold interest in a unit, and it's a pertinent common interest. The board is the board of directors of the corporation. The manager is the condominium management provider, the condominium management services, condominium management services, and condominium manager. They have the same meaning as in the Condominium Management Services Act, 2015. And it means an individual who has the prescribed qualifications to be licensed as a condominium manager under this act and who provides condominium management services. Below, you'll find the links to the various legislations quoted within. Let's look at some of the layman terms described. A corporation is a non-profit entity that is responsible for the operations of the building. Your board of directors are elected volunteers, and I like to highlight the phrase volunteers, who carry out the duties bestowed upon them by the act and condominium's governing documents. They're often known as the decision makers. The owners are members of the condominium corporation who own proportionate share of the common elements and contribute to the common expenses. An analogy is also as shareholders. Finally, the manager is a condominium manager who executes the decisions and directions received from the board and acts in the best interests of the corporation. I've used an analogy as a chief operating officer here. And now we're going to look at an organizational chart. So we've drawn upon a little map of how it all ties together. Overall, you have the corporation here. Then you've got the owners who are represented by the corporation auditor and by your board of directors. Now, the board of directors oversees the operations of management and the lawyer. Tonight, we're going to delve into the relationship types between the board and the manager, board and the owners, and manager and the owners. In our opinion, the relationship between the board and the manager is contractual and fiduciary. This relationship is often defined and outlined in the management agreement and the governing documents. The analogy here is type of an agency or an agent. The board and the owners have a fiduciary and representative relationship, and this relationship is outlined in the act and the governing documents. Please see your bylaws, often it's bylaw number 1. And the analogy here is the elected official and constituent. And as Pat earlier mentioned, that don't forget to vote. The managers and the owners, we find that is a contractual and also a fiduciary relationship. But I think it's also a very complex relationship. It's often direct and based on the daily interactions. Management possesses the authority as per management agreement to enforce governing documents. And this relationship is often very adversarial. And that's something we're also going to explore tonight. So now we're going to delve into the first segment, is the board and the manager. And this is where I would like to also have the panelists to get their take on. My take on this is manager is contracted by the board of directors to carry out the duties as provided in the management agreement and the act and the governing documents. The board of directors acts as the decision maker and in the supervisory role. The board directs and sets actions for the manager to execute. The manager acts as an agent and on behalf of the board. Now, I'd like to hear from the panelists on how they see this relationship between the manager and the board. Pat?
Well, to me, in my board, really, this is the key function of the organization. This is where we either have a successful condominium corporation because we have a good relationship, and I define good as more than just having the manager being knowledgeable about the act and knowledgeable about the business. There has to be synergy between the personality of the manager and the board. So you develop that relationship. It's not just professional. There's a personal aspect and confidence that the manager and the board bring and develop working together. And that is really what I think strengthens and molds the relationship going forward. And if you don't have that empathy and respect for each other and the qualifications of each other, then you really go down a rocky road in a hurry. So yes, the manager brings the professionalism, brings the professional qualifications, the knowledge, but also brings an empathy, humanity, a recognition that for the directors, it is their home. It's not just a business. It's not just an esoteric thing, and there's more to it than just numbers and management contracts.
Thank you for that, Pat. Asaf?
Yeah, I'm 100% aligned behind that. I'll just add also there is a trust element that needs to be there. You know, the contract is not enough, and you can have the contract and everything's good, but if there's not everything that Pat said plus the trust, it's just not going to work. And there's a lot to do, especially in our corporation. It's relatively big, and we have a lot of units. And if there's not that trust and that real personal relationship between the board and the property manager, it just doesn't work well.
Okay, Nadia, would you like to say a couple of words as well?
Yes, that's very good advice. My experience is that life in a condo is a unique living arrangement. Conflicts and disputes are bound to arise at some point, and the best way to resolve a dispute is to avoid it before it happens. And we're going to touch base with that a little later in our presentation. What's really important is that it starts with effective listening, showing empathy, and building a relationship. You know, let the residents know that their voice matters. And at the root of almost every conflict is poor or lack of communication between parties. A good board communicates with residents regularly, explains its decisions, openly discusses problems and victories, and has a policy of transparency and truthfulness.
Okay, I think you got a little bit ahead of today's presentation, but I appreciate that. Thank you. Now, another very important topic is the board and the relationship between the board and the owners. Board of directors should never forget that the board is duly elected by the owners, and the board almost always, and I like to underline the word almost, is that there are times where the board consists of non-resident and even non-owners, but that's a topic for another discussion. The board generally consists of the owners, and this board is generally divided into the owner-occupied position or the offsite owners. Board of directors represents the owners in the affairs of the corporation. The board reports to the owners on the affairs of the corporation on the annual basis, maintaining transparency and direct communication as previously mentioned. The board reports to the owners as mandated by the Condominium Act twice a year through periodic information certificates containing the budget status, reserve fund balance, and expenditures, and many other affairs. Lastly, and most importantly, the board is accountable to the owners for the assets and the financial well-being. Now, I'd like to hear from the panelists on their relationship with their ownership.
Sure.
Pat, first, or Asaf?
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say that at the end of the day, most of us are owners as well. And we're elected to represent all owners in the day-to-day management and of the condo corporation. The relationship the relationship has to be there, and we have to always remember that we're acting on behalf of all owners and not just some owners, and everything we do, we have to take into account all owners and what most owners would want. Transparency is very important here. The work that's being done, it's very important that it's communicated, the good and the bad, the problems, all the highlights. So it's very important to keep that information flowing and be very transparent about everything that's going on. And we usually even do more than what's obligated in the Condo Act. So we hold at least 2 or 3 voluntary information sessions a year. Anytime there's a big increase because of reserve fund, or anytime there's a big expense, which is a reserve fund expense, we try to get ahead of that and always communicate to owners what's coming and what's going to come and the decisions that we have to make, so we can get input before we make these decisions. So we always welcome input from anybody, and I think that has to be there if you really want to represent everybody.
Okay.
Absolutely. And Asaf, I'm sure I know your condominium is significantly larger than ours, about 4 times. You have 250-ish units. We have 57. But communication, and you said it, Nadia, as well, really is the basis for any success. And like you, Asaf, we also have a strong communication policy. Not only do we send out notices and notifications, and it was particularly so during COVID, where we were prescribing what we were doing, what the requirements were for deliveries, for access to the building, because people wanted to be safe. When we had units up for sale, we announced that realtors would be in the building, because some of our clients had expressed concern. They didn't want to be out in the hallway if they were going to bump into strangers. So communication truly was essential, is essential. And that's what builds up so much trust and confidence in the ownership. We also have and utilize a group conference so that our residents could go into a Facebook group that only they are allowed to go into, and have discussions and contact each other, ask questions. So that also builds community, but it keeps the issues and concerns going. I think we share, and most condos probably do, that commitment and realization that communication is key to successful management and successful relationships, be it between the board and management, between the condo corporation and the owners.
Okay. But I feel like there's one essential ingredient that's missing, and I think that's the next little segment that we're going to review, and
The manager?
And that is the relationship between the owners and the manager. In our opinion, that the manager actually often acts as a conduit between the board and the owners, and the manager acts in the position of the authority to enforce the governing documents. Owners correspond daily with the manager regarding the affairs of the corporation, and owners often seek guidance from the manager on the affairs of the corporation. I'd like to hear from the panelists on how the owners generally correspond with their manager in their respective communities. Asaf, if you want to go first.
Sure. So I'll start by acknowledging that I think this is it's not an easy relationship, and it's not an easy role to be a manager and to interact with owners, especially when there's so many owners. And customer service is hard, and this is a type of customer service because the manager is hired by the corporation to basically service the corporation, and everybody's an owner, right? So it's not easy, especially when there's so many voices, and some people have very strong opinions, as the managers in this group probably know, and concerns, and this is not easy, but it is part of what we have to deal with. I think it really helps to set a very clear communication strategy around how an owner interacts with the manager. And I think it also helps to set up a dispute process or an escalation process. At the end of the day, at least in our corporation, we also have a superintendent on site every day. So owners can interact with the superintendent for things in the building. They can also interact with the manager. They have the email and they can call, they can send emails, and the manager manages the day-to-day relationship or any concerns and with the superintendent. But we also do have an escalation policy. So if there are certain things that can be resolved, or there's conflict or a disagreement between the owner and the manager, we as a board ask to be informed about that, either in our board meeting through a communication package, or if it's more urgent, through an email distribution. And we also have an escalation process where every owner that's not satisfied by the answer or the service we're getting from the manager or the superintendent can ask the manager to escalate that to the board. So I think having a very clear communication process here helps with, and that's known to the owners. Of course, the owners need to know about that. Really helps when it's a many to one relationship, right? Because the manager needs to deal with all the owners.
With us, because we are.
Before you start, there is an interesting comment, and I think it's right to where in your wheelhouse, that there is, in a smaller condominium, 55 units, there's more direct contact between owners and the board. And the manager interacts primarily with the board members. I think that is something that is similar to your community. Would you like to touch up on that?
Sure. We have 57 units in ours. And we have a part-time custodian Monday to Friday, 8 to 12. So with us, there really is a direct relationship between the unit owner and the project manager, particularly when there are individual condo unit issues, such as plumbing issues. An example, the kitchen sink is backing up. It's late at night. Who do they call? Well, there is the on-call, the after hours number. They do that, but they'll probably send an email to the manager, and they'll copy the board. We have made our emails very accessible, and we have made our board members very accessible to unit owners, partially because our custodian is only available part days. And so there's a board interaction with the unit owners that also helps facilitate questions. But the prime contact that unit owners have when they have an issue within their unit or with common elements of the building, such as elevators that hiccup from time to time, they write directly to our property manager who deals with it. And given that, our property managers probably do a lot more hands-on work directly with our unit because it's a smaller unit than they would with bigger units where there's significantly more support staff, perhaps full-time custodians, supervisors that would become involved. So I think we have the advantage, if you will, being a small condo, of having a more intimate relationship with the property manager who gets to know our residents, perhaps on a more personal level than he would the large condos, which is a benefit for us, a very strong benefit. The downside, if you will, because there's always a give and take, is that it also means that the condo owners, the residents, are obligated to become more involved in the running of their household, because the condominium truly is the extended household of the individual unit.
Okay.
Asaf,
right.
how many units do you have in your corporation? There's a Q&A and one of
Yeah, I was just typing that answer. There 231.
two. Okay, great. Thank you.
And I believe Pat mentioned 57, right, Pat?
Yes.
All right, now let's explore this relationship that we just discussed, and we'll keep on going. So in this segment, we're going to look at the roles and the responsibilities of each of the parties. Now, in order to understand the relationship, it is imperative to review the roles of the board, the owner, and the manager. As previously mentioned by the panelists, it is important to set the expectations and the responsibilities. And in a little graph, we're going to show you how it all ties together. The board. Directors are responsible under the Section 37 of the Condominium Act to exercise the power or carry out their duties for the corporation with the standard of care. This generally means that directors have a duty under the Act to act honestly and in good faith, exercise the care, diligence, and skill that a reasonably prudent person would exercise in the comparable circumstances. And a big reminder to all the board of directors that effective November 1st, 2017, directors are required to take the online training offered by the Condominium Authority of Ontario. Alternatively, you can visit CCI and also conduct the director's course. The primary role of the board is to represent the collective and individual interests of the owners and residents. Secondary, achieve organizational objectives, overseeing the operations of the corporation. There's a distinction between the governance and management, and we're going to also explore what that is. Lastly, the board needs to set and shape the direction of the community. One of the roles for the board of directors is to approve, delegate, and authorize. The board generally approves maintenance work, delegates the enforcement of the governing documents, and the authorization of a particular action on the agenda. Additionally, the board identifies, reviews, and determines. The board identifies the needs of the corporation and acts accordingly. The board reviews the governing documents and acts accordingly. And the board determines the needs and the wants of the community. Before we proceed to the owners, I'd like to hear from the panelists on some of the roles that they have undertaken in their various communities, and if they could expand on that with their examples.
Sure. I see the approve the maintenance work and delegate. Our condominium is approximately 16 years old. So it's like the body growing older. The older you get, the more maintenance you need, and that's certainly true of condominiums as well. And we find that the first few years everything's fine. The reserve funds are fine. You're just saving money, but then the cracks start to show, and the pipes have to be cleaned, and the plumbing and everything else starts requiring a lot more attention. So as the hiccups start, we do approve through the budget process, through the reserve fund process, the work that has to be done. It's inspected, we get costs, and we approve that. But we also monitor the work at times, because we don't have the professional ability of the property manager, nor is it fully expected, or the time of custodians to provide oversight. Ideally, you shouldn't have to, but realistically, you do. And so, although we do approve the work, we also look at and meet with the contractors. We walk them through the building to get an understanding of the scope of the work that they do, and talk to them about special issues, so that they understand that we are responsible management board. And this is where the board sort of gets its feet into some of the management responsibilities, because quite frankly, it has to. and then we monitor and provide oversight. We've had significant savings in our condominium from different things where contractors have come in with estimates, haven't really fulfilled the bill, brought in the wrong equipment, but offered to charge us the same amount of money. And it was only through working with the assistance of our property manager to renegotiate and get a fairer deal for the condo because they didn't do the work. And this is, again, where the relationship with the property manager is so important. Their knowledge of the industry, really what has to be done, fair pricing, and then bringing that to the board's hands-on experience and making decisions. So I agree that the approved, delegate, authorize is essential, but it's also an involvement and a little bit of management oversight that goes into that as well to ensure value.
Thank you, Pat. Asaf, do you have any comments?
Yeah, for us it's a bit different because it is a bit of a bigger building, and we have more staff to help with this. We have a great property manager. She's very knowledgeable, and she's an expert in her field, and she knows way more than we do about all these things. So for us, the delegation is key to what we do there. We have good procedures in place in terms of how and what we delegate. We always have something going on in the building. We have many small projects, and sometimes we have bigger projects. So we do have a financial policy where under a certain amount, the property manager can tender or can approve specific things, especially ongoing contracts that need to happen in the building. And then bigger things, and especially things that are bigger maintenance things like elevators or other things, big projects that need to be done, reserve fund projects. We will discuss them in the board meeting. We'll go to tender and we'll review results and we'll have recommendations. But at the end of the day, we rely on our property manager and our experts that are hired to make the recommendations, and then we can debate and debate the recommendations. So the delegation piece and approval piece is big for us because there is a lot going on day to day, and we don't have the capacity to deal with it. So a bit different for us there, but like I said, that's part of the relationship that we talked about in the first part. It's you have to make sure you have a good relationship with your property manager. The trust has to be there, because at the end of the day, as board members that represent all the owners, and as owners ourselves, we want to make sure we're maintaining our building, the value is there, we're keeping value of our units, and everything is being done in timely manner, and everything's being taken care of. We also help identify projects. Some of the owners know who we are, so they approach us and talk to us and suggest, and as things come up, we bring them to the board meetings to discuss them. Let's say a big issue recently with a lot of people staying home in COVID was security. There's been, especially around downtown Ottawa, there's been an increased number of break-ins and locker break-ins, car break-ins. So we do always try to identify improvements. Could be something that's needed because of a certain circumstance, or it could just be an improvement to the building. We haven't done furniture for a while and we want to make the patios better. So we do try to collect feedback from owners in our informal information sessions on what they would like to see happen in the building, and we encourage any feedback on what's going well, what's not going well, what people would like to see. And then we also try to offset that with things that are needed, and try to identify what's the best use of our budgets and the money we have to maintain the value of the building.
Excellent. So thank you for introducing the owners to this process. And I believe that is the next thing we're going to talk about. Under the Act, the owners are tenants in common of the common elements and undivided interest in the common elements as a pertinent to each of the owner's unit. And the relevant sections of the Condominium Act are sections 10 and 11. The owners form the condominium corporation and the community. The owners are responsible for the repair and maintenance obligations as set in your declaration and other governing documents. The owners are responsible for the contributions to the common expenses. But I don't think that that's what all the owners do. There's actually more to it. And owners play a vital role in the condominium governance. The owners can join committees and act in an advisory capacity. Owners can form clubs and activities to promote a sense of community. I'd like to hear from the panelists on what kind of owner engagement they have in their respective communities.
With us, because our condominium is smaller, we do have a number of things really. As the world goes to e-cars, e-vehicles, and the requirement to renovate condos to provide e-vehicle fueling, we do have some people in the building who are specialists, who are very knowledgeable, and who have volunteered to work on a committee to help identify the requirements, the costs, the responsibilities of developing the e-car fueling stations, hookups in our unit. And we've done quite a bit, and we're working with the CDG group of directors who are working with other condominiums so that we could all benefit from the same investigations. We don't really have too much of a social club. Everybody pretty much knows each other. But we do encourage committees. We do have a house committee in which we have people that are knowledgeable in decor and whatnot that provide advice on the reserve fund renewals, carpeting, painting, things like that. As the staff does when we go into major expenditures, we do have meetings with the owners to ensure that everybody's on board with the way we go. And we encourage participation when however people wish to do. But a lot of people seem to do what they want, but they like the privacy too.
So I have a question for you, Pat, before Asaf touches upon this. So if the owner is not happy with the way that the governance and all these activities that the board undertakes, what can they do?
Join the board. We're always looking for new members to get involved. We're very fortunate to have a number of people who have rotated through the chairs. So in our little community, probably a third, perhaps maybe a little bit less, would have over the course of the 18 years been board members. So they have an appreciation for the responsibilities, both in terms of what the board should do and their roles. And they're very willing to help. Very seldom do we have individuals who bully or try to present, take control and force their view. For the few that do, then there are the rules, there are the bylaws, and we'll talk to them. As the staff had said, you escalate it if you will into aspects of their declaration too, which take care of that. But generally, people, once you talk to them and they settle down, and but you can't let them get away with anything either. There are the rules. People obey the rules. We're in a community, and the community has to get along. The rules are there to help people get along.
All right, Asaf, do you have anything to say?
Very, very similar for us. I guess at a minimum, it would be nice if owner involvement would be at least AGM to vote for condo board members. I think that's very important. That's a way for them to get involved because they can select who they want to represent them. And that happens once a year, so that's not a lot of effort and involvement. So definitely that's one way for them to get involved. Second way is we have a few committees. We try to keep a board member in each committee, but we encourage participation from owners and not just board members for these committees. So that's another excellent way for owners to be involved and participate and help identify projects, identify problems, identify opportunities, and contribute to the community as a whole. We also have a website that we maintain for owners, and it is by owners. So anybody that has useful information, tips, recommendations, we do maintain a website and we publish content for owners on the website that can help any owner or resident or anything, any useful information we can think about. So we have a communications committee that's responsible for that, but anybody is encouraged to participate. I'd say pre-COVID, we used to have 2 social activities a year, usually one after the AGM and usually one during the holiday season, which was nice. The only current social gathering that we have is a virtual book club. That's still going on. I think they call it a book club, but I think their main purpose is to get together to drink wine. But I wasn't there, but I'm pretty sure that's the reason they get together.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Now, I think we forgot about someone. And I think that's the manager. So according to the Condominium Management Services Act, the condominium management services means any of the following services provided to or on behalf of the condominium corporation. Some of the duties include collecting or holding contributions to the common expenses and other amounts levied by or payable to the corporation, exercising delegated powers and duties of the corporation and its board of directors, making payments to third parties, negotiating contracts, and supervising employees and contractors. This is just an extension of some of the duties under the CMSA. And I wanted to hear from Nadia Freeman, just to kind of get an overview of what else does the manager do, and then we'll jump on to the rest of the panelists.
Thank you, Val. The other responsibilities of a property manager is that the basic role is you have to listen, you have to be a great listener, take action, and attend to an owner's concern. Once again, the key is communication and keeping residents informed. Always be honest with them, even if delivery of the information is not what they want to hear. But in the long term, it will show the condominium manager's integrity and build trust. That is really important. Be transparent and honest at all times. Over to the next slide.
Now, how do we tie it all together? So we prepared a little table for everyone to see, and we'll start. We listed some of the activities that happen in the condominium, and we broke it down by a role. So we'll go to the policy and procedure first. So what does the board do and how to do it? The board reviews the policy and procedure. The board approves the policy and procedure and delegates or carries out the enforcement themselves. What does the owner do? They tend to comply. They provide feedback if on the committee or in advisory capacity, or they can even challenge if necessary. What does the manager do? The manager provides a recommendation and implements the policy and the procedures. But what about the bylaws and rules? The board reviews, approves, and delegates. The owner, of course, tries to comply, provides feedback if possible, and can even undertake a vote if voting for bylaws or a change to a declaration. What does the manager do? The manager provides recommendation and enforces such governing documents. What about the act and the declaration and the actual enforcement of the matter? Again, the board reviews, authorizes, and delegates as previously mentioned. The owner tries to comply, provides feedback if necessary, but can also challenge by a way of a requisition. And the manager, of course, carries out the duties as directed by the board of directors. What about the budget? Annually, the board reviews, sets, and approves the budget. According to the declaration, the owner contributes to the common expenses set in the budget and provides feedback either before the budget is set or after on the future expenses. Contractually, the manager prepares the budget and provides recommendation. And finally, they distribute the budget to the owners as per appropriate notice. But what about the relationship with the owners and the residents? The board often advises the owners and residents to voice concerns in writing. On this particular issue, the board determines the outcome and makes a decision. As previously mentioned, some of the panelists have a process of how this all comes about. And the owner reports any issues to the manager or directly to the board, often complies with the decision made by the board or not, or can even challenge if necessary. And as previously mentioned, the manager is that conduit. The manager manages the relationship, communicates directions and decisions of the board, and communicates with the owners as deemed necessary. I'd like to hear from the panelists on how they feel about tying it all together. Pat?
Well, your spreadsheet there, it certainly does go through the process of what should happen. And I think what often does happen, sometimes it doesn't follow the steps exactly, but I would agree that those are the rules and the procedures. We've been very fortunate that there hasn't been many issues, if you will, where you have to read the riot act to owners and delve into the declaration or the bylaws or the rules. We have had one or two instances that we did have to speak to some people, but generally, when you point out that, let me put it another way, generally people ask, can we do this? Or if they do something that's inappropriate and not in keeping with the declaration, the bylaws and the rules, then you say, hey, Sally or Billy or whoever you are, that's not what we do here, and how could we help you get around it? These are the rules. These are the what you have to do. Some of the things seem to be just silly. We have a rule, and I'm sure it's in others. It's part of the boilerplate of these things. But you can't put wreaths on the outside of your doors in the hallways, and a lot of people like to decorate during the holiday season. But we've managed to maintain that because beauty's in the eye of the beholder, if you will, and some decorations which are pretty for some are not pretty for others, and or express different things. So there are those things for the common good that we do enforce. There's other rules that we don't enforce, and one is a bike rule. We have very limited bike capacity storage in our building. We've tried to improve it, but with some of the cyclists we have in our building, their bikes are worth more than my car, and so they're saying we've had, as you had, Asaf, thefts from the building. We've lost bikes, very expensive bikes, and so. Although we say you can't bring your bikes up in the elevator and store it in your place, it's an ignored rule, and we don't really see too many people doing it, but we know it's done. And so there's a give and take by the board and the community, as it would be in a family, where you deal with issues, but you're not the law. And I think that's what helps make the association and the relationships between, it cements them all, because you're not ritualistic or legalistic in the interpretation and enactment of this.
Okay, Asaf? I think you're on mute there.
Not a lot to add. I think this table represents what usually happens. There's always exceptions to the rules, and you know, sometimes let's say just owners with relationship with owners or communication. Sometimes if something escalates, maybe one of the board members will step in to help manage that relationship and that discussion. But again, this is usually the rule, and this is usually how it happens. And there's always exceptions to this table, but I think it reflects to how we follow the process.
I think you just introduced our next kind of a topic here. How do we manage this whole thing? Managing and maintaining the relationship, and that's the first segment that we're going to look at. And as previously mentioned, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to set the expectations, be open and transparent, educate and inform. And while you're managing and trying to maintain the relationship, I believe that integrity is key. It's important to remember that the board and management are in a position of power and authority when dealing with the owners. Please ensure that you show compassion, understanding of the issue, and critically, respect. Managers should often seek the feedback on performance from both the board and the owners. The manager and the various parties should listen and engage the owners on new ideas and the direction. Managers should also often provide feedback to the board on their performance and on the action items that they're undertaking. Now, before we go on to the next segment, I'd like to hear from the panelists on how they manage and maintain the relationship between the board, the manager, and the owners. Pat?
Me first. I have a tendency to be long-winded, so I'll try to keep this one short. Again, it just speaks to the relationship that you build in working on a day-to-day basis through the issues, and I agree that integrity is key. You can't ask or expect your owners to do anything different than what you're doing. So board members have to obey the rules. Board members have to work within the situation that they expect all the unit owners, and openness and discussion is key. You know, when you chop this whole discussion up, communication. It's like when you sell a house, it's location. Well, here it's communication, to have a relationship with the management, with the staff, with the owners, open, honest, all the time. That's what's going to work. And if you don't have it, it's not going to work. You're going to suffer accordingly.
All right, so.
Yeah, I would add that setting the expectations, I think, is the first step in the process and very important. Boards change. You may change property managers. So I think every time there's a change and you haven't worked together, setting the expectations is very, very important. And be really honest and transparent of what each side is looking to operate with inside this relationship. Some boards like to be more hands-on than others, and some want to delegate everything. So I really think the board needs to understand what they would like to be involved in and what they what they don't want to be involved in. And that needs to be an open and honest conversation with the property manager and vice versa, like the manager, also the expectations from the board and how that's going to work, especially if there's other staff in the building that the corporation employs and the property manager manages on behalf of the corporation. So setting that expectation is very, very important. And I think once that expectation is set, then it's the communication, making sure that everything is communicated between the board and the manager, and also between the manager and owners and the board and the owners. So if you have board meetings, make sure the redacted notes are sent, and not just like, there's nothing wrong with just proactively sending the redacted notes at the end of every board meeting. Like, why wait until somebody asks for them? It's an email, it's easy to send, and be transparent about it. Make the information easy to access, over communicate. I think that's always a good policy.
Okay, Nadia, do you have anything to add?
No, that's great. Well said, both Pat and Asaf. That's great.
Okay, but what about those situations where sometimes it doesn't go as planned, or sometimes things go awry? So what usually happens? Let's look at that. So how do we manage the conflict? As we know that the condos are really interesting, to say the least, entities. So let's look at the nitty-gritty stuff when managing the conflict. When you try to manage the conflict, the idea here is obviously to resolve the conflict, find mutually acceptable terms, achieve the goals, and most importantly, prevent the damage, and lastly, build the community harmony. Now, I'd like to ask the panelists these three questions. Should the condo property managers and the boards develop the skills in the managing the conflict in this area? Top, you want to go first?
I don't think you develop the skills. I think you have them before you become a manager, a property manager, and sit on the board. It's a requisite that that you bring with you to the positions that you serve.
Saf, do you have any comments?
So, you know, property managers are certified, and they go through a certification process and education and training, and definitely it's important to have. That's their profession. They're the experts, and that's what the corporation hires, and what we need, because we are not experts. Saying that, I think each board member can bring a specific skill set to the role. You know, we all do different things in life, and every skill set is good. So whatever we can bring that applies to managing or representing the owners on the board is good. But I also think it's good that we have an education process for new directors to understand or elected directors to understand the responsibilities, and to give a bit of training in the area. And you know, the more you know with relating to managing condo corporations, the better your decisions and your votes are. It always helps. And again, specifically for conflict, I think also having training and understanding on how to resolve conflicts and how to approach conflict situations and de-escalate situations and move forward, training in those areas also helps.
Yeah, but what is the value in the dispute avoided or properly managed, or properly managed? Scott?
Well, there's all sorts of value. There's a cost value, a dollars and cents value, that if something gets out of hand and it escalates into the lawyers, could go into courts, could be extremely expensive, and so there's a financial cost avoided if you could satisfy and correct it in step one. More importantly, though, there's the human cost, because we're a community. That if you could avoid a conflict and settle it, and you have friends, it's like a family. Then that emotional cost that you save and you grow through there is particularly important too, because in our community you keep bumping into each other all the time, and if there's that element of conflict or distrust or disrespect of board managers, neighbors, then it just festers, and that kind of cost could just eat into the whole organization and make living in the condo unbearable, which causes other problems. So I see it twofold like that.
Yeah, and I think the only thing to add to that is we're all very busy people, and managing disputes and arguments and dealing with that just consumes more time. So at the end of the day, you know, we'd like to deal with the issue at hand, and anything that can escalate or is a dispute is just more time consuming, and you know, it's just sometimes just a, like, I don't want to say waste of time, but this time can be better spent on other things.
Absolutely. But what if it all goes awry? When do you really need the professional help? We're talking, you know, the legal professionals, accounting professionals, whatever the dispute is, alternative dispute resolution professionals. When would you need that? Let's talk a little bit about that.
I think you touched a bit on at the beginning about empathy and making sure we represent everybody as board members. And you know, sometimes an owner can feel very strongly about something that relates to their unit or something that's relevant to them, and they're the only ones that have the problem, but they do feel very strongly about it. I think we should always be, when we're not sure or when we do not know or there is doubt, we should seek professional advice. Even if it's just a matter of one or two or minority of owners. We all have issues in our units or issues with our units, and we don't necessarily always know the right answer. When, you know, just an example from something we've been dealing with recently is, when is an elevator noise a problem that the condo corporation should pay for? And is it a problem if only one unit owner is complaining about it, but they feel very strongly about it, and they're very sensitive to it, and they can't enjoy their condo and because they always hear that noise. So at what point do you say, no, it's your problem, versus trying to dig in deeper and spending corporation money to investigate or replace or fix or get advice? So I think when there's issues that there's no clear answer on yes or no, it's always better to ask professionals and consult the property manager, and then consult the lawyer and see what our legal obligations are. And, you know, and maybe sometimes the lawyers will say something, but we would want to go above in our legal obligations here, because it is a community and we do want to make sure that people are enjoying the space. So I think whenever there's doubt, and it's a topic that we are not experts in, which is probably, I'll say for myself, it's probably most condo corporation areas. You know, I know, but I'm not an expert in these things. I think we should talk to the experts and make sure that we're really representing all our owners and getting the right answers for them.
I agree fully. Nothing to add.
Okay. How do we get through some of these barriers that we just discussed? It's important that the community develop and use the communication, negotiation, and mediation skills. Some of these are already there. Some of these can be developed. When we have a conflict, how do we deal with it? Obviously, we want to get into the early intervention, and we want to plan, and if necessary, as previously mentioned by Asaf, get professional advice. Try talking, try negotiation, try mediation, formal or informal, before the arbitration or litigation ensues. So this table represents two segments. One is the informal and the formal dispute resolution. The informal is often voluntary, interest-based, collaborative, less expensive, private, And there's a high potential for win-win situations with both parties get away with what they need. And importantly, it is relationships centered. Now, the formal process is often mandatory, whether it's arbitration or a lawsuit. Legal rights based, it is clearly adversarial, more expensive, public, as some of the court decisions are posted. High potential for win-lose, one way, and its relationships peripheral. Before we get into the tips on how to improve and foster your relationships, let's look at some of the situations, maybe some examples where our panelists have undertaken the informal or sometimes even a formal process of dispute resolution. Scott, can you think of one?
Well, there have been some. Part of it gets into the bullying aspect that we had. Our building, because it's a combination renovation, new build, has some sound issues between floors and in some instances, one instance in particular, the terrace is located above the one unit's place, and so you get noise transfer. We have our exercise room located above another unit, and you get noise transfer from rowing machines and different things that could cause anxiety, if you will, among the unit owners, and particularly through the COVID process, where everybody's more at home and working from home. So there were tensions that became irritated a lot quickly over time, and some unfortunate incidents happened. But through the discussion process, the talking about it, give and take, in most cases, you work it out and people are reasonable and sensible. Quite a while ago, we had to go into a more formal thing that ended up costing the condo corporation a lot of money. And we went through, what's the court, $25,000 settlements, the one
Small claims?
Small claims, and we brought our lawyers in, and we had 100% guarantee win until we went to the judge, who decided that we didn't, and so then you really have to settle, and it was very expensive. So whenever you talk about an informal getting together, personal approach, what Asaf has outlined earlier in his comments, 100%, that's the way to go. Because once you start down the formal road, it's very difficult to turn back. The result is unknown, and it could be very expensive.
Yeah. Stop.
Yeah, agreed. You know, when you go the formal route, you don't know what's going to happen, and you may think that you're going to win, but you can't get guarantees that you're going to win. And usually, even if you do win, like, what did that win get you? You just spent thousands of dollars in court fees and lawyer fees and professional fees. Maybe it would have just been cheaper to meet somebody halfway and solve it informally. So we always try to do the informal way. We have some very smart board members on our board, and some of them have some experience in law and always have very good advice for us on how to deal with things. An example I can give is let's say the elevator noise that I talked about before. Everything about that is on spec, the noise level is valid, and there's nothing going over and above the noise levels that we need to ensure when our elevator is operating. But really the one owner is very sensitive, and there's an issue, and they kept complaining and saying that they can't enjoy their unit with the elevator noise. So at the end, we decided that we were gonna investigate that further and maybe apply some fixes and maybe look at it, which all cost the corporation more money. And then when there were a few sparks around the legal issues, legal representation there, we, at the end of the day, we could have butted heads and say, no, like the readings are all good and we're not doing anything. But we did decide to talk to the owner and say, okay, listen, we'll replace the brakes and we'll do this ahead of time, ahead of schedule. Maybe it won't work, but this is how we're willing to compromise and do it and try to help with the situation. So I think it also shows good faith and helps with the relationship with the owners. I realize you can't do it all the time, and some things are not reasonable, and sometimes you have to go the formal way. But we try whenever we can to really talk about it, negotiate it, and make sure that all the concerns are heard, and really we try to help with whatever we can before it becomes a formal dispute.
Okay, Nadia, do you have anything to add to this process?
I do. So dealing with difficult homeowners is no easy task. However, with the right strategy and attitude, you can pacify the complainant and maybe even get that person on your side. And if you want to deal professionally and deal with the situations, then you can. There are other routes. I do a lot of negotiations and sitting at the round table, and I highly recommend that all parties just make the best effort, to sit at the round table. Sometimes, you do have to go to the legal route, or sometimes you have the condo authority that needs to step in. But, once again, communicate as much as possible.
Okay, I think we're getting into the tips area. So let's look at those. Let's look at the tips to improve the relationship. I think many times tonight it's been mentioned that engage your community, hold town halls and informational sessions, provide updates via newsletters and e-blasts. Definitely seek volunteers to join the committees or the board of directors. Create websites, community portals to share information, streamline services, provide records in a very transparent fashion. Like Nadia really touched upon this many times tonight, and that is listen, and again, listen. Gain full understanding by active listening. Be open to a dialogue and reasonable resolution. Most importantly and crucially, maintain your professionalism. Any comments, panelists?
Fully agree. And we've have formal processes to ensure that those are done. That was particularly important during COVID, and how we dealt with guests, how we dealt with deliveries, how we facilitated unit owners and their concerns. But you just go down the list, and we've done it. We've done a few other things as well, but it's communicate in every form you can, and be open to all the questions you get and answer them quickly.
Nadia?
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add to that, but you're absolutely right, Pat.
Yeah, nothing to add. I think everything's been said here.
Okay, I think we are entering the final phase of tonight's presentation, and we're going to take some questions. I see that some of the questions have popped up in the Q&A chat. Thank you for submitting those. I'm just going to go one by one. How many owners in each of the corporation represented by the panelists?
So that question's already been answered because Pat has 57 in his condo corp and SF, I think you said 220 in yours?
231, yeah.
231, yeah. So that was an earlier question.
Okay. Elaine, does that answer your question? I believe that does. Mr. David has 30 units, no on-site assistance, and he has board chair who usually communicates with the property manager. Sometimes that specific dynamic does exist. But I think we did touch upon the various dynamics in the smaller unit condominiums, and we also touched upon some of the bigger ones. So I think that that was answered already live. So there is a question. I do have an understanding of the manager's role. My question related to a lack of confidence and trust in the managers, and in that circumstance, what is or could be the role of the company that employs the manager? I think, Nadia, this is a question right in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, once again, the different roles from the company, you would really have to check your management agreement. I don't think that we could really answer that question at this time. You would have, like I said, you'd have to check the management agreement, and then maybe even have to, get your lawyer. I think this is more of a legal question versus, versus one for us, because we just don't have enough time, to get into that one.
Just
I
one
think
comment.
they're asking. Yeah, go ahead, Asaf.
Yeah, so just to bring it up on a higher level, not in terms of legal advice or how to get out of the contract, but I think at the end of the day, as a board, if you don't have confidence and trust in your property manager, the board needs to change property manager, or the board needs to change. So assuming the board is staying, you don't have confidence and trust in the property manager, I can't see how that can be healthy for the corporation. It's the company itself that employs the property manager. They probably have other property managers. So is it a property manager company? Is it a communication problem? Is it a company problem? So you like, I don't know. For us, if we don't have that problem, but if we would have that problem, it'd be very hard for us to operate. So I would assume we would either be talking to the property management company to seek options to have a different property manager, or we go to tender and look for a different property management company.
I think that what this participant is asking is there a hierarchy, and what would the management company, what kind of role would a management company play? Let's say if there's a lack of confidence in the manager. Is there a hierarchy? Can that person, can the aggrieved individual go to, let's say, a regional manager or a director of operations, or even a vice president or president of the company to address some of these concerns? And I think that's what the person is asking.
And I would agree that you should. You have a contract. If you're not satisfied with the way the contract is being served by the property manager at hand, then you have a right to work up the chain of command, if you will, in the company and say, hey, my property manager we don't have confidence that we're getting the quality of service that we expect from your company. These are our concerns. Can you, do you have another manager that could take over? We had experience with a number of companies before we've settled on the first. We've had excellent managers from various companies, but every once in a while, a company, and this was before accreditation and whatnot is mandatory, you get inexperienced property managers that have been put in, and they would rotate them through smaller companies, smaller condos, because they're very knowledgeable managers were taking over big high rises and needed their expertise. And so there was a little element at one time that we weren't getting the quality of service. You sit down with the property manager owner and you discuss it, and if it could be resolved, great. And if it can't be resolved, then it's like any other contract. You seek a new provider, and but it's your contract, it's your management, it's your condo. You have the responsibility to ensure you're getting the service you contracted for. If you're not getting it, seek redress first with the property company. And if it doesn't work, as Asaf said, you go out for tender and get another property manager. There's some phenomenal companies that are now becoming available because of the education and the qualifications required under the new Condominium Authority Act.
Yeah, no, I think that that is a good answer there. Thank you, Pat. Okay, so we have a next one. Mr. Lane, actually, can we have the person ask that question maybe live? Because I think that's a very important topic on the rules, which rules to enforce. Can we unmute Elaine, see if he can answer that, or I mean, have a discussion with him? Would you be able to do that, Nadia? He's the first one on the participant.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you go ahead? No, I'm not able to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a very important question, especially, you know, given the fact that we did discuss the rules and the regulations in tonight's segment. And we agree that you can't really pick and choose. Otherwise, you're not really doing what you're supposed to be doing under the Condominium Act. You know, if there is a rule that's not being enforced, well, unfortunately, at some point, it's not going to be a rule anymore. So as I previously mentioned, that you can't really pick and choose. So Pat, do you have any other comments than that?
No, I agree. If a rule's a rule, it should be enforced. At the same time, I do agree that there is times that you get around it or you allow for it. In the example that I gave about some of our cyclists with very expensive bikes, taking them up, we have a very small unit. We have 3 elevators, which contributes to our capital costs, and that's a different discussion altogether. But I bet you in our organization, you wouldn't bump into anybody taking the elevator more than once a week. And so for those people who do from time to time take their bikes up in the elevator for security reasons, there's no harm to the elevator. There's no inconvenience to other residents, and so we know it's done. We don't see people doing it particularly, and so there's a quiet acceptance. We also have clauses in the Condominium Act that says just because you don't enforce something today doesn't mean you can't enforce it tomorrow. And so if this practice were to get out of hand and all of a sudden everybody was bringing the bikes up, there was congestion, there was damage, different things like that, then we'd enforce it in a hurry. But it's part of the living together and making sure the harmony and everything works. There's no damage for 1 or 2. There's damage if 57 do it, but 57 don't want to, and 1 or 2 do, and there's no harm in ignoring or playing low, but you don't want to not have the rule. But we're not a police force. It's rules. I think declaration is hardcore federal justice. Bylaws, that's hardcore provincial laws. Rules are nice to do, and they keep things going in harmony and whatnot. And they're there to be enforced. If they're broken and deliberately, and but generally it's a rule, it's a guideline, and that's what helps build the harmony and cooperative living within the condominium. So I don't worry about not enforcing rigorously every rule. In fact, I think it'd be a pretty tough place to live if you did enforce rigorously every rule.
Well, that's great. So I think I think I can now allow someone to talk. I'm going to give it one more try. So I'm going to ask, it is Hartmut Kroll. So I'm going to allow you to talk, and if it doesn't work, I apologize.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm hoping that you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
The point that I was trying to make on this is that there are two things. One, if you make too many exceptions, then you can no longer say that a rule is valid. And Pat, I disagree with your point on whether or not you are setting a precedent by not enforcing the rules. Once you have made exceptions for one person, you have to make an exception for everyone. And this just totally gets out of hand. I think knowing your declaration, your bylaws, your rules and regulations, your operating procedures, you're living in a condo, which means that everybody has to make accommodations to everyone else. The individual who asserts himself, the individual who says rules don't apply to me, no, it just disturbs the harmony of the condo, the equilibrium of everyone that is living there. We have one, we've got a small 55-unit condo in bungalows. And we have a rule about color of doors, front doors, to try and maintain a common look and feel. We've had a couple of people who say, no, my door, I want my door to be marine blue. I want my door to be pineapple yellow. I want my door to be fire engine red. And the condo board members have said, no, the regulation is you can have any shade of white that you like, or beige. And it works because we are accepting of the idea that we live in a condo and we have the rules and regulations to try to accommodate broadly, not necessarily the individual. And I'm not sure that that's always a good thing, but it is condo living. That was all I was trying to get at there.
Thank you for your question and for your statement. I think that it does touch upon the living in the condominium, but there are exceptions to the rules, and there are situations where you have to provide an exception, whether it's the Human Rights Act or the Human Rights Code. So it's not always as as easy as it seems, and there are situations where you have to take various facts into the consideration.
I'll just add, Val, I think if a rule became a rule, because usually they should be looked at by a lawyer before we put them in, or at least somebody that can validate that. Yeah, but of course, if they're against laws or bylaws or anything official. Of course, they can't be rules, but I tend to agree with Hartmouth. We can't pick and choose. If there's a rule, there's a rule, and the job of the condo corporation is to make sure that the rules are valid. There's an easy solution: remove the rule and change the rules. And if it's no longer applicable, I think that's a way better way forward than ignoring rules. We've had a few of these situations in the past where things were no longer relevant and seemed crazy, and basically we just had a meeting, got the support, and removed the rules, and then you don't need to enforce them anymore.
Okay,
Great, thank you. We're gonna allow Selim to speak. Selim, you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. I had just a question about how the board members on the panel stay on top of work that's going on around the building. I think there's a lot of work that goes on around the building, and in particular, I guess, to the property manager as well, or the property managers here as well, how they've helped their boards stay informed about the work going on around the building.
How big is your condo, Salim?
I'm a former board member on my condo. Our condo is quite small, 73 units, though it's an old building, so lots of work.
Yes.
okay. Well, thank you for that question, Salim. I think I'll take a first stab at it. It's demanding. There's no way around it. Depending on obviously on the project, but I think we've touched upon a little bit tonight, and that is the communication. We want to keep, as the manager, we want to keep our stakeholders, or whether it's owners or the board of directors, we want to keep them apprised of every development. We want to ensure that there are timely deliverables, and if there is a change order that's required on the specific project, we want to ensure that it's communicated accordingly. I think, again, just to kind of reiterate, communication is key on this. Otherwise, things can just go awry. And how do we stay on top of it? Well, there's various tools that we use to track progress. We use community portals to communicate updates on various projects. We use tracking sheets. We use spreadsheets to ensure that the deliverables are met to a certain date. Action items lists. The list can go on. Pat, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that covers a lot of the communication from the manager to the board, from residents to the manager. That's that, and our residents include the board members on their communications to the property manager. So there's a good awareness of the needs and the schedules. We also have a commitment that we made and keep whenever we have major work done in our building, and that's from the annual window washing, garage cleaning, to the more specific onerous pipe, kitchen drain, stack cleaning. Whenever we have anything that's going to impact on residents, we let them know, ideally 2 weeks, at least 1 week ahead of time, so that if they have to move the cars, or if we have to be in their unit, or if it's going to disturb them in some way, we communicate so they know what they're going to have to do, and it gives them an opportunity to ask questions as well. Again, it's communication, Salim, and our board is very active. Our board has a lot of retired people that live in the condo, and to some extent it's a bit of a hobby, so they stay involved and knowledgeable, and work very closely with the property manager and the unit owners to ensure that everything is working. And we follow our reserve fund. The schedule is there. We know what has to be done through the budget process. We know major work that's going to be happening, the big ticket items, if you will, the plumbing contracts, the elevator contracts and maintenance, the HVAC, cooling, heating systems. Those are the ones that really absorb our money, and that we have to be and are very vigilant about the expenses that we incur, and so it becomes an interest that way.
Thank you, Pat. I'm going to allow Vincenza to ask a question.
You want to clean up the list of panelists so that it doesn't get convoluted? Just
Sure.
Okay, good evening all, and thank you. I just wanted to know whether the condo board panelists could comment on whether they see the continued use of virtual meetings versus in-person meetings as having potentially a negative impact on harmonization within the condo community. And if so, how have you compensated, or how will you compensate for that?
I'm happy to start, but for us, it's been condo virtual meetings have been very positive. We had our AGM last year with Zoom. We had 40 plus unit owners attend. Traditionally, when we had the in-person AGMs, we'd have 20 to 25 plus some paper proxies that do it. So we find we've had a better turnout using the virtual of our meetings. And we're about to go into our AGM for this year. We know already from unit owners who are going to be out of town that they will be coming in on Zoom. So from that aspect, Vincenza, it's very positive. Once we can, because of once COVID is subsides a bit more and we're able to get in-person meetings, we'll try to do a combination, and that would bring some together too. But for us, it's been great. We've also had our board meetings. We moved our board meetings to basically twice a month. We have a top-up meeting halfway through to handle issues that have developed and changes that have been developed because of COVID and whatnot. And with some of our board members being out of the province, in fact, one of our board members is out of the country, but everybody comes together on Zoom. So it's been particularly beneficial for us, and an asset that we will continue to keep. I hope that helps.
I'll say that I'll start by saying that I'm very biased here because I work for a tech company, and I cannot imagine why there would not be virtual meeting option for people joining. And this is not just for COVID. It's really some owners don't live in the area and they're remote and they like to join, but they can't join in person. So I think having the option and the combination is really what we need to do. And we actually passed a bylaw for that, and we allowed virtual meetings for our corporation. And the intention is post-COVID to keep the in-person because there's a social aspect, but really every meeting we do have an option to dial for remote and do a virtual meeting, a voice or a video. It will help with keeping owners that rent and don't live in the condo connected and available to participate. Some can't participate, and it helps with quorum as well to make sure we have enough people participating.
Thank you, both of you.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you, Vincenza.
Thank you for that. Val, do you have anything to add to that? Because as
I'd like to actually present a little opposing view onto this. I think eventually, as things start to open up, the people will want to trickle down or trickle in and congregate and ask those questions on, in person. In fact, just earlier last week, we held two board meetings that were in person. In fact, it was the most weirdest thing I have ever done, probably, but it felt, at the end, it felt real again, and it was nice because it was, I found it much quicker. The decisions were made instantly. There was no additional conversation, chatter. I think people were just on the ball. Perhaps it was just the first meeting, but there was that kind of relationship building aspect as well, because it's been Zoom or any other virtual platform for the past year and a half. So I think that people just wanted to kind of get in person and talk, just kind of face to face, have that relationship, right? So I think that you'll see people trickling in. I think that there will be an opportunity for a hybrid model down the road for annual meetings or town halls. I think that the boards and communities should consider accommodations. There are certain individuals and certain owners that do not have access to various platforms, various online platforms. And in fact, that one of our communities last year, we held a turnover meeting, and it was a hybrid. So because there were some owners that could just not access the computer, and we hosted it in the party room. So it just, you have to accommodate, and that's something that's going to stick around. I think the accommodation part, and some people will just want to sit in, and that live discussion. I think looking at the body language, looking at how your board members answering those questions or your manager, I think that's important, and I think that's going to come back at some point in or some form or shape.
Thank you, Val. I'm going to allow Lorraine. Lorraine, you have a couple of questions.
Yeah, I think Lorraine has three. One of them I think we will not answer when it comes to lawsuits against boards. I think that's something that should be consulted with a legal professional if there is a situation like that. So we will not answer.
Correct. And Lorraine, the other question you have is, does CCI have a standard management contract available for CCI members? No, that is not the role of CCI, so they do not. And the other question you had was, does CCI recommend management companies? If not, why? Once again, that's not their mandate. They're not going to suggest one management company over another. I think by the groups attending these various webinars, it's a great question for the panelists and people who register, or taking a look through Google, who are the property management companies out there, and some give ratings, and that's the best way to handle it. But once again, CCI does not get involved. Or you can ask your lawyer. Your lawyer will deal with a number of management companies as well as your auditor, so you may want to consider that.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you, Lorraine. I think just to add to that, Nadia, I think that CCI does have a vendor list. I think it was distributed in the last newsletter. There was a vendor list of various trades that CCI kind of, I don't want to say recommends, but they are listed on the directory. So there is a vendor directory, I believe. I think I saw that.
Yeah, you're right. There is a directory, but I don't think CCI makes a recommendation over one company or the other.
No, they don't. I think those are just, I would say those are just members, CCI members that are listed on the vendor directory, like business partners, or
yes,
I think that's what it is.
that's correct.
Okay, I'm just wondering if CCI's mandate could be changed to include that. I think you have a benefit for the community at large, and that would be something that CCI should consider.
That's certainly something we can bring to the board of directors for their consideration. They obviously host meetings, and they take suggestions from the educational or other management advisory committees. So that's something that can be brought up. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay. And there's an interesting question. Would you consider asking owners regarding PM or PM firm replacement? I think I would flat out say no. I don't think that's something that that's decided by the owners. The contractual relationship, the board, I think I touched upon that before. I think the board of directors make the contractual decisions, unless somebody has an opposing view.
Is
Can you repeat
asking
the question?
feedback?
So would you consider asking owners regarding PM or PM firm replacement? So let's say you're not happy with your PM. Would you consider asking your owners whether you want to, go to tender or, because I see the validity in that question. I think because it's a major expense, you would want to ask that question to the owners. But do you actually do that? Or do you just go out to tender yourself, right? So.
We wouldn't ask. We would certainly explain to the ownership, to the condo, to our fellow community members that we've been having difficulty, and it's not going to be a sudden decision. When we've changed management companies in the past, the community was well aware of why we were looking elsewhere, because they've experienced, and it talks about the relationship that we've had. It's not just a property manager board relationship, it's a community board property manager relationship. And the community is well aware of the deficiencies in the property manager that the board, as to why the board would want to change. It's not an overnight thing. So we would tell that we are going to tender, that the contract is expiring within the 30 days or 90 days or 60 days or whatever the contract is, and we're going out, but we wouldn't be asking the community for permission to do that. The responsibility of the board, we would take that.
Yeah, Nadia, you want to clean up the
Yes.
panelists real quick?
We're just going to have, we just have enough time for just one more question from Irene. So Irene, I'm going to unmute you.
I didn't have a question. I just had a comment with regard to the question that was just discussed. It seems to me that most owners do not have a lot of dealings with the property manager. So I'm not sure that they would be in a good position to provide useful input for determining whether to change property managers.
So Pat or SF, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I
There's a
think
lot of noise. There's a lot of noise. Somebody's microphone is rustling.
yeah, maybe Lorianne, maybe you can, Nadia, maybe you can mute.
Yes.
Lorianne. Okay, thank you. So I think I may think a bit differently about this question. I think any input is valuable, and any input you ask anybody, and especially the owners, is valuable. But it's all about how you interpret it and understand the scope and the knowledge that people that don't participate in a board have. Some owners may have more knowledge than others and may have very insightful recommendations or input, and some may not. Somebody may just be very mad or very upset about how something was dealt, and hence the comment or the feedback. So my personal opinion is feedback on anything should be welcome. It's really how the board takes and interprets that feedback and brings the context around that feedback. There's a lot of things that the property manager does that owners are not aware of. There's a lot of things the board does that I'm sure some owners are not aware of. So really it's just up to the board to take that feedback and interpret it within the context that the owner has. And sometimes it may be useful and sometimes it's not, but as the board is elected by the owners for the owners, I think it's our responsibility to take feedback from them on anything they have.
That's great. Thank you.
You're here. Yeah. Well, there's one last question. Can the board require all attendees at the AGM or other public meetings to be vaccinated? We passed a bylaw permitting virtual meetings. You know, I was waiting for the vaccination question tonight. I'm glad that it popped up right at the end. And unfortunately, that's something that we are not able at this moment to discuss. I think that the rest of the panelists will agree.
Yeah, I don't think we can either discuss it or require it at this point. So, but I understand there is a discussion coming up shortly where that topic is going to be a matter of record as the industry and the province and the Department of Health and everything come together. It certainly is an issue, and I know we've been asked in our building, can we ask everybody if they've been double vaxxed before we open up the fitness room? Could we ask people if they've been double vaxxed if they bring guests into the building? We don't know that right now, and so we'll wait until we're informed as to exactly what we can do and can't.
Thank you,
Okay.
Pat. So we have time for one more question from Diane.
Did I? Hold on, let me see.
Whose condominium is that? That's a beautiful little place.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi,
Are you
Diane.
Are you referring to my question about the CMRAO?
If you would like to ask the question, yes, please.
Okay, we were in a situation where we ended up with a big expense because of mismanagement. And we wanted to take the complaint to the CMRAO, but we have a very low cost management company. And at the time we were scared that we would be left in a lurch because they would just cancel the contract. So just wondering if we were to do that, and well, it's probably too late now, it's a year ago. What would the repercussions be with the CMRAO? Would we be in a position where all of a sudden we wouldn't have a management company?
That's a slippery slope.
Diane, I think that's a really good question for your legal team and not for us as managers or our two board members.
Well, you're not familiar with the CMRAO procedures? I don't think it's a legal question. It's just a question about the CMRAO and what the outcome would be.
I think it's hard to judge the outcome at this point. I think there is a process in place. CMRAO has good resources on what the complaints process is all about. I encourage everyone who would like to submit a complaint to review the CMRAO website. I think it lists everything that you need to kind of know. There's a step-by-step process that's explained. I think that should be a starting point. I other than that, I really cannot comment on the individual of facts or individual circumstances.
Okay, well, we're just, I guess, left at our own.
Yeah, I wish I could be more of help. It's one of those situations where it's maybe if you want to take a leap of faith, if you don't, it's totally within your purview.
Well, yeah, I think we'll be taking a leap of faith once we get our finances in order this year.
And we wish you best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Once again,
Excellent.
I apologize. We couldn't answer that question, and I sit on the CMRAO, discipline and the appeals committee, and I couldn't answer that question for you. I'm really sorry. Listen, everyone, thank you so much. This has been a great fun. Pat and Asev, you guys are absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. And Val, great job. And once again, I want to thank all our sponsors, Elia Associates, the Regional Group, and 3D Security. And you will be emailed a short evaluation following this session. We would appreciate your feedback on tonight's session. And once again, thank you so much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. Most enjoyable. All
Yep,
the best,
thank you all.
everyone.
Stop sharing it.